Okay, hi everybody. We are going to go over the two poems that were part of your day 3 assignment. Okay, so the first one being this poem, The Race. Again, this is kind of a long poem, so I'm not going to do a read through first. We'll just jump right into the questions. I think that this poem is actually really straightforward. Something like this actually would have been awesome for the poetry essay because it's very narrative. You get a very clear idea of how the speaker is feeling and, this rush to try to make it to her father. But I don't think that this is difficult at all in terms of just understanding what the subject of it is and, kind of the tone that she's taking here. So let's get into the questions. The first question is in line 22. I, who always go to the end of the line, suggests that the speaker is usually. So in the poem, this is the part where she says that she runs up to the counter basically and says, help me. Okay, but she always goes to the end of the line. So obviously, the implication of that is that she's usually a rule follower, or somebody who isn't going to necessarily like stand up for herself. So the correct answer there would be not very assertive. Okay, question 2. In line 30, this refers to which of the following? So, as always, especially here, it's in the middle of a sentence. We need to look in context. Okay, so I used my legs and heart as if I would gladly use them up for this, to touch him again in this life. So the word this there is talking about her purpose, right? And her purpose is to make it to that plane no matter what. So in line 30, this refers to which of the following? So her purpose to make it to the plane, okay, to touch him again in this life because she is trying to get to see her father before he passes. Okay, question 3, about lines 41 through 43. Okay, I'm sorry, this kind of moves it on its own after I change the question. In lines 41 through 43, like the one who is not too rich, I turn sideways and slip through the needle's eye. Now, they actually are asking you a question here that includes a footnote or an endnote. And anytime they give you one of these notes, please do pay attention to it. They're giving it to you for a reason. That reason is usually because you need to understand that in order to answer a question. So, obviously, it's a biblical allusion based on the note, okay? And therefore, the answer is illusion. Okay, they're kind of really just giving you the answer there because they're showing you that it's from the Bible. Okay. All right, question 4. In the poem, the speaker, experiences all of the following except. Okay, we have an except question. Please always pay close attention to that because usually these questions aren't too hard unless you miss the except. So just always mind that. The one thing that out of these choices that she never really expresses is a resentment at her father's illness. She is very fearful that she won't get there in time. The connection between them is clear. The limitations of her strength, she talks, the dependence on others when she has to ask the people in the airport to help her. So she's expressing all of those feelings, but she never really expresses resentment about the illness itself. Okay, taken as a whole, the poem depicts. So you're really thinking like overall in the whole thing, what's the kind of whole theme? What's the kind of subject overall, the tone overall? So here we have a resolution of anxiety. She is extremely anxious that she won't make it to her father in time, and fortunately, she manages to do so. Just be careful with choice B. Okay, that's kind of like a distractor. It's not a joyful reunion when she makes it. she's relieved, but of course not happy, because she still knows that her father is going to pass away. Question 6. The speaker's description of herself as a fish slipping upstream deftly against the flow of the river helps characterize her action as. So if we're looking at that in context, okay, she says, if we kind of started here where she says, okay, I ran. I, who have no sense of direction, raced exactly where he told me, a fish slipping upstream deftly against the flow of the river. Okay, so that metaphor there, it is important that you pay attention to that word deftly. Deftly does mean doing something like, it's almost like agility, okay? Doing something in an agile way, in an effective way. So, and she's going against the flow of the river. So there's kind of this obstacle in her way, but she's managing to navigate it. So when you're thinking about that and looking at the answer choices, the best answer choice would be purposeful and instinctive. Be careful. I could see it being possible with choice C, reading that too quickly and looking at it as effective. Okay, it's ineffectual, which is the opposite of that. So be careful with that. And at that point, there's, if she's deft, there's no awkwardness. So watch that with choice A as well. Okay, question 7. The speaker's feeling that she is not in complete control is most directly suggested by the image of, you kind of have to take a look quickly at the choices here, because it's, it's a lengthy poem, so you're not going to just, off the top of your head kind of remember which image is showing the most lack of control. So, if you run through the choices, the first choice is the bus. You'll see a yellow bus get off at the second Pan Am terminal. Okay, so that's nothing really. It doesn't really have anything to do with her lack of control. Then choice B with the bags, in line 17 through 20. Okay, there we go. I jumped off that bus with those bags I had thrown everything into in 5 minutes and ran. The bags wagged me from side to side as if to prove I was under the claims of the material. Okay, so that is the answer. All right, the bags are actually controlling her movement at that point. If it makes you more comfortable, you can quickly take a glance at the other choices. But when you see how the bags are being described, it's pretty clear that that's the answer. Okay, question 8, last one for this poem, and then we'll move on to the second poem. The syntax of the first sentence, lines 1 through 5, establishes the speakers. Okay, so lines 1 through 5, the first sentence. So you go to there, take a look at that. When I got to the airport, I rushed up to the desk, bought a ticket. 10 minutes later, they told me the flight was canceled. The doctors had said my father would not live through the night and the flight was canceled. So if we're thinking about this grammatically, like if this was just, regular writing, obviously that would be a run-on. But this is poetry, so things are going to work a little bit different sometimes. So she is expressing these ideas almost like too quickly to separate it into multiple sentences. So the speaker is feeling a breathless desperation at this point. All right, the ideas and the feelings are just kind of flowing very quickly because she feels so desperate. Okay, and that's it for that poem. All right, so now we move on to the Triple Fool. All right, this is a much shorter one, so I'm going to kind of just give it a read through because this one, I think, obviously, some of the vocabulary and syntax is a little bit more challenging. So just so you have an idea of how it is, how it flows, like if you just read the whole thing. I am two fools, I know, for loving and for saying so in whining poetry. But where is that wise man? That would not be I, if she would not deny. Then as the earth's inward, narrow, crooked lanes do purge sea water's fretful salt away, I thought, if I could draw my pains through rhyme's vexation, I should them allay. Grief brought to numbers cannot be so fierce, for he tames it that fetters it in verse. But when I have done so, some man, his art and voice to show, doth set and sing my pain, and, by delighting many, frees again grief, which verse did restrain. To love and grief tribute of verse belongs, but not of such as pleases when 'tis read. Both are increased by such songs, for both their triumphs so are published, and I, which was two fools, do so grow three, who are a little wise, the best fools be. Okay, so obviously a little bit complicated, a little bit meandering in the ideas, but at the very least, you can tell that this is a love poem, okay? It's about the speaker trying to kind of deal with his feelings through poetry. All right, grief brought to numbers cannot be so fierce, for he tames it that fetters it in verse. So you're trapping the grief by expressing it in the poem. And he also makes this comment in the beginning about whining poetry, okay, in whining poetry. So almost like saying that like he is whining a little bit by creating this poem. Okay, so let's take a look at the questions. In context, numbers in line 10 refers to which of the following? It's kind of a weird question. It's like the closest thing almost that they would ever ask you to a grammar question on this test. But instead of it being completely grammatic, it's almost like how does the one idea relate to the other? So grief brought to numbers cannot be so fierce, for he teams it that fetters it in verse. So the answer here is actually verse. Okay? The grief brought to numbers cannot be so fierce, for he teams it that fetters it in verse. Numbers and verse relate to each other. Okay, because it's kind of the way of like quantifying or dealing with the grief. All right, so if you run through the other choices, they're a little too disconnected to the idea of the numbers of grief, like the enumerating the grief. Okay, that one's a little tricky, for sure. Okay, in context, line 22 is best interpreted to mean that. So that's the very last line of the poem here. Who are a little wise, the best fools be. Okay, who are a little wise, the best fools be. So it's kind of like, even if you have a little wisdom, you can still behave very foolishly. And again, like you want to kind of try to interpret it a little bit in your mind before you look at the choices. So when I look at the choices, the one that is the closest to what I just said, like people who have some wisdom can still behave foolishly, is choice B. Okay, that's really what that last line means. Okay, in context, the speaker is made a fool of for a third time as a result of. Okay, so you actually have to find the point in the poem when he says it, which is at the end. Oops, sorry. There we go. And I, which was two fools, do so grow three, who are a little wise, the best fools be. So now you found where he says that he's the fool for the third time, but you have to see, like, where does it go back to? Okay, like it has to be referring back to something. So he says, okay, some man his art and voice to show doth set and sing my pain, and by delighting many frees again grief, which verse did restrain. I'm sorry, I should be highlighting this for you. It's up here. Okay? So what he's saying is, I wrote this poem, and now some dude is going to go out and perform it and entertain people with it, but then it just reminds me again of how hurt I was and how much my life sucks. So the answer would be the public response to his verse, okay? Everybody is super entertained by his story of woe, but it just makes him feel lousy again. All right, question 12. We're getting there. Almost done with this assignment, guys. In lines 12 through 16, what happens to the poetry the speaker has composed? Okay, now this question, if they're giving you both of these questions, it's kind of one of those things where it's like a gift or a curse, like this question and the last question. If you got the last question right, it's really easy to also get this question right because it goes along with what we just said. It's publicly performed. Okay, somebody is coming out and reading this poem for people as entertainment. But like I said, it could be a blessing or a curse, because if you got the last question wrong, then you're probably more likely to get this one wrong too. So it's just one of those things that, you know, it's the concept kind of goes together for both questions. All right, question 13. In the context of the poem as a whole, the speaker can be characterized as all of the following, and here's our little friend except. Okay, all of the following except. So when you're thinking about the whole poem, you have to think about, does he kind of speak this way at different times? So is he lucid? Lucid meaning clear. And he is clear, like he knows how he feels. He knows how he views this situation. So that can't be the answer. Contemplative, he's certainly contemplative because he's thinking about his feelings and the effect of the poem and all of that the whole time. So that's not the answer. Resentful, I'd say he has a little bit of resentment, especially in this part that we just looked at, where the people being entertained are kind of renewing his grief. All right. So I would say that there's some resentment there. Okay. So C probably isn't the answer. Envious. Is he expressing any kind of jealousy here? Not so much. He's talking about grief. He's talking about being hurt. He's calling himself a fool, but he really never expresses any jealousy. So this is most likely the answer. And then E is self-deprecating. Self-deprecating is the ability to kind of poke fun at yourself, make a little bit of, like laugh at yourself a little bit, which he's definitely doing. He calls himself a fool, a 3 times fool. He refers to his whining poetry, which is all self-deprecating. So the best answer there is D, envious. Okay, last question. Hooray, you made it. The speaker describes his poetry as whining because he believes it is what? So what would be the best description here? He's saying it's whining, like, you know, almost like, and he says it's foolish for loving and for saying so in whining poetry. So why is he whining about being in love and being in grief and all of that? Because it's undignified. Okay? The poem isn't flawed. It's got nothing to do with being original, not original, educated, not educated, any of that. It's that it's undignified. Okay? And that is the last question on this assignment. So I hope that those explanations were helpful to you. Okay, kind of check what you did, check what you missed in light of what I've explained here. And as always, if there's something you still need help with, please just get in touch. Okay, and I will talk to you guys soon. Okay, so keep up the good work. Just keep doing your best. And be in touch if you need to. Okay.